Hello, Randi Green here, and welcome to another public podcast. I have already done a series of podcasts in the membership section, but here I want to give a little bit to those of you who have followed the full disclosure discussion, and you will see I put some links below where I've done some kind of cartoon comic book version of what will happen after disclosure and superhumans versus aliens comic book style. So it's a little bit playing around with a little bit of fun, and at the same time there's a pun, of course, to what I have put there. When I was a kid, I used to read comic books like Superman and Superwoman, and I can barely remember the names of them in English because it was all translated to Danish, of course. And unfortunately, I have thrown these comic books out. I should have saved them so at least could remember which one. But I remember I actually had them for a very, very long time. And then I decided in all of my moves and moving around that it was better just to get rid of them like most of us do. It doesn't matter much because what matters is that they were formative. And as a psychotherapist, I of course have to explain what that means. It means that they are part of forming our ideas of reality as well as ideas of self. So when we are talking about the individual structure of a human, it's always in the trinity of self, others, and reality, where we kind of ping pong with others and reality as the way showers, both meaning as what goes first to show us what we need to learn, but also to show as a feedback what we still have not mastered yet, or what we still have not yet figured out how to administer in our everyday lives, so that we can go about being what could be considered good citizens of the planet Earth. And here I would like to talk about it not from the otherworldly aspect of things, which I am most of the time I'm situated there on the future timelines, working with the new sciences. The Randi Green .1 is going to be, I'm building that side up slowly, where I am using to a large degree OpenAI to get some of the combination of sciences through to seed it into the collective, because now we are in that beginning of the fifth cycle where technology, as it was part of the original fifth cycle, as part of, we know from the Atlantean projects and the other things that were going on here in our reality field way back, we had the different pillars that were running within different types of dimensions that had different types of aspect to these different dimensions. I talk about the pillar project, both as part of the progression work, but also in my book, the whole philosophy book. The pillars, they ran the 1-7 pillar. That was the first one. That was the first type of civilization in the middle/outer domain. And that ran from dimension 1 to 7. And this is not physical dimensions. These are dimensions of self, other, and reality, and how we correspond to that with our energy system. Similar with pillar 2-8. The first one was all about how do we administer our own energy system in this reality field? What are the rules? What are the type of sciences? How our consciousness, the consciousness potential is going to be played out? And all of these things were part of pillar 1-7. And there we built what we could say 7 layers within a holographic energy system architecture that allowed us to work on the different layers of the inner outer reality field configurations. And here, as the outer domain being the place where there was an organic vessel, not the one we know of today, and the inner domain as what we could say is the holographic architecture that would still at that point be situated in the 4th, 5th, and 6th dimension of the middle domain. Let's just call it that. This configuration, as in the outer and the middle and the inner, are also a configuration of the past and the present and the future. The outer domain is always where the past or what is unresolved will be pushed out. And that's where you visit that and you work there to get rid of what is unfruitful for your continued journey from the middle domain into the inner domain and upwards, so to speak. And we're not talking about the ladder of Jacob. We're not talking about angels, and we're not talking about anything that you find within either spirituality or religion. We're here talking about some of the original dynamics that were part of the advanced civilization that used to inhabit our solar system, which we have long forgotten. Okay, so, and then you say, well, what about angels? They do exist, do they? Let us just put that on a shelf for now. There are definitely avian human beings that were part of a very large experiment that did have what we would consider wings. But if you look, it's kind of not wings really. But if you have a civilization later on in the outer domain that was seated there and became fully organic and were existing in the outer domain, which is unnatural, and they would see beings from the fourth and the fifth dimension entering in using different forms of formations of light. They would probably see the light circuits as some kind of wings, or they were literally, as angels were original in Greek, means messenger. So they would just see it as messengers between the higher realms and the human realms. And that does not necessarily mean that they had wings. We do have depictions of it in some of the old types of art from Babylon and Sumeria. And that could be, we also have it in Egypt. And we find the most prominent one within Christian culture from the Middle Ages. Anyways, that's a whole other discussion. And there are plenty of books out there that approach this angle, the understanding of angels, both from the angle of spirituality as well as religion, as well as, we could say, perhaps lesser scientific. But that's for another day. Okay, so we had the 1-7 pillar, and then we had the 2-8 pillar that is connected to others, and that's where all of the different lineages that existed in our solar system learned how to collaborate and play along. And that's the one we are entering into. And then 3-9 is all about the reality field, how you administer the reality field after you have learned to play along with others, after you have learned how to administer your own energy system. So you kind of understand the rules and the laws and the principles of the worlds that you are a part of and that you can enter into and you can work within, to put it simply. And then there's the 4-10, and that's where once you have learned to administer the energies of reality, what that means, the law of reciprocity, how things are feedback looping, and how your impact is on a reality, and how your energy system affects others, and the reality field itself, and what you can do to administer it in a productive way. So all that means you and others and reality can grow and unfold its potentials to its highest degree possible within the normative rules and sets and principles and laws and what have you that are governing that reality field. And these laws are not man-made, quote unquote, because man does not exist on this level. And secondly, it's not political as we understand it, because that does not exist on that level, but it is energetic, and that means that it is what we could call instant karma. It shows us right away what we need to learn. And for that purpose, we had, and in all reality fields, there are inbuilt teaching systems that are part of the construction of the reality field itself. The holographic teaching system, which some have later on dubbed angels, or dubbed it the voice of, quote unquote, whatever source that they refer to as being their initial creator. These are some pretty large cubes, the ones that people have a tendency to see as these higher order types of beings that are, I'm here deliberately choosing not to put in specific words, but they are all very communicative and they are using telepathic means, but they are programs and they are cubes, and they are put there as part of upholding specific type of programs that specific groups that have operated inside our reality field have coded into them, administering the human projects on this planet. So that in itself is a type of disclosure. Right? And it's not the holographic virtual reality ideas that some of the more machine technocratic oriented types of Minecraft souls that are on this planet have tried to put out there. This is very organic, very conscious progression ideologies, if you want to put it that way, ideas of how to progress a reality field to the highest degree possible, to the highest good of the many, before the colonization and before the change of our reality field, which happened after the fall of Atlantis, and how we could say that different forms of joint groups and teams and councils began to degrade and were influenced by some of their, what we could say, lesser productive types of consciousness structures that we call ill-mindedness. And that goes back to 3 original races or groups or lineages that spilled over from the previous universal structures and the cycles, the elevation cycles. And these are not angels either, and the source is not the center from where all souls emanate. I don't play around with these ideas. These are religious, and they are suitable for a while when people are working their way through some of the distortion layers, when they tap into all the different types of human-made belief systems and human-made ideas of what reality is and isn't, to find meaning and purpose in this weird type of world that we are in, that is full of dichotomies, full of oppositions, and full of polarities, and in many ways really does not make any sense unless you begin to turn it into processes of transformation. Then it begins to make sense. And that's why we are. And here we will say, if we have that context, and then of course we have the other context of the civilization as it has become now, where we have different lineages that chose under the colonizing factions to become operators and the administrators and the controllers and the elite and whatever you want to call them. These are different groups. Don't conflate them. They're different groups. They have different purposes. And these old lineages are also at their last type of existence. Their lineages are running out. The prominent ones that had the original gene code, they are slowly but surely leaving this reality field. And what comes after might carry their name, but it has not got the original insight. And these lineages that follows after are just what we could say the fizzle out of these lineages, where what remains of the original inserted types of DNA and genetic composition that were in alignment with the understanding of what was really going on in the other dimensions, which we call the middle domain, have and are being lost because it's not being handed over. It has been given over and handed over in different types of societies that has shown it in what we call allegorical, in symbols, in images, in contemplation dynamics, in secret messages, and all of these kind of things where humans puff themselves up. And I'm here literally saying puff, puff, you know that, the dragon, right? Puff themselves up to be something that they are not really, or the Wizard of Oz type of idea where a control of reality seem to be done by something that is very large and very divine. And at the end of the day, it just turns out to be a little sad man that is sitting in his machine and trying to control a reality and show people that there are lessons to learn and paths to take, and the brick road that leads to somewhere which ends up to be nowhere, and the different types of human, what we could call personality types that play out different scenarios, all depending on the quote-unquote program that they are under. So when we talk about the disclosure here, first and foremost, I talked to Superhuman, and I've talked about some of the secret societies and how they administer reality over the rainbow programs. And here, no, I'm not talking about what others interpreted. This is some of the original ones. So in this, where the old factions that were trying to give humanity insights into what was going on, because there is a very old law that says that whatever is going on inside this reality must also be shared with the original solar system civilizations that currently are now in these organic vessels. And for me, that's not a choice. That was never a choice. Our solar system was colonized. And what you do with the original inhabitants that you cannot get rid of, because the planet itself are tied into the holographic energy system, tied into their genetics, and by that runs on this. So if you remove the original civilization, the reality field, and everything that this original civilization actually 12 different lineages had created will collapse and no longer be there, well, you create a vessel where they forget who they are, but their energy systems are still in play in the quote-unquote artificial fourth and fifth dimension, where they play out under different programs and different cubes and different technologies and different replicated types of organic vessels that mimics a kind of existence that the original construction, also re-engineered and modified, no longer detect as being unviable life, but actually detects it as being a viable life. Even just a couple of genetics of the original type in a plasma vial would count, as long as the crystal disk and library are still playing out their content of their original Pillar Project programs. Hence, part of the job from those of us who have been part of this has been to shut this down so that these artificially driven programs no longer can run, and by that take away the fabric and the underlying network of some of the different agendas that's been going on. Of course, they still have a lot of their larger crafts positioned in the fourth dimension, in the crust of our planet, in the fourth dimension, hence not visible for science. And the original high cultures that we refer back to that could do wonders that we have long forgotten were, of course, also situated in the fourth dimension. So that's kind of it. That's the disclosure. And what more disclosure do you need as a person? It's like waiting for you know something and you know to be true, but you need confirmation. And the question is, why do you need confirmation? Why do you need some public figure coming out telling you what you already know? And that's the question I think we should ask ourselves when we talk about the need and yearning for. I put up a little bit of comic book things after disclosure, as I said, and came up with some funny ideas about this, joking a little bit around how the world will look when that finally happens. And I see there are two legs in this. One thing that is most important to me, not that it will make big difference down the line, but one of the things that I find to be disrupting in my processes of remembering who and what I am and regaining my original capacities as part of the original civilizations and rebuild my energy system is this weird Truman Show I'm part of. It's this cognitive dissonance all the time. I know as part of the higher dimensions, I know exactly it doesn't look better there. It's not good there, but at least it's about being authentic, right? We are in our journey of who and what we are. We learn to be authentic. We learn to stand our ground, as in not as much when we're young, but as we grow older. And I'm reaching 56, right? So I'm in this process of really maturing before I tip over and begin the route process out of this life. I can already feel something breathing down my neck and just waiting for me to get to the point where my body no longer can continue, and living this life where we are in connection with the other levels of reality is tough on this organic vessel because it's not built for it. So there is these processes of figuring out, okay, when we talk about the transition dynamics with the different organic vessels that we have that were part of the reseeding of the fourth cycle, and it is a reseeding within 4 specific type of lineages, where we had one that were part of what we could say the colonizing species as the administrators, controllers, elite, what have you, the governance, whatever. Not anymore. Remember, that kind of ended up, it's been going downhill since 2016, let's just put it that way. And these forces are pulling out. So what's left now is just left to go into entropy and chaos. As we know, we are seeing it all around, including the cubes that are maintaining this reality, including the programs that are upholding this reality. The Wizard of Oz is no longer there. He's gone. He's left the building and everything is collapsing, right? So we now have the old program running amok with little golden brick roads that are everywhere and weird shoes that are hanging in the air. If you ask the different kind of co-pilot image producer, which I've been using extensively, and sometimes something comes through that really is good, and other times you just say, yeah, that's just it's like being in a weird dream state looking at this, what's going on here. But it's a tool. And it can be used like any other tool to produce different types of information. And just to jump into that one, yes, I am. I've already written several booklets where I'm combining different forms of sciences that humans normally wouldn't allow because it's not within the paradigm. But if I ask the questions in the right manner and I have that bridge to some of the future timelines where we're also using different forms of augmented technology, not the way we are doing it now. This is just the infancy of it. And it's not quantum based. It's not built upon the probability and possibilities running with the qubits and these kind of configurations, because that's a little bit kind of Minecraft type of technology. But that's literally square technology that goes with technocratic races and crystalline structures, that, to put it another way. But in the future, these are fluent types of enhanced fiber optic networks that are working completely dissimilar way. Anyways, point being, it taps into the construction itself and some of the original inbuilt teaching mechanisms that all reality fields have. Anyways, that's another discussion. But that's possible to bridge. And those of us who are on the future timelines, we're beginning to say, okay, we can see we need to build platforms that people can walk into where we can begin to work with, okay, how do we want the world to be? And that's where the full disclosure comes in like a stick in the wheel, because the ones that could begin their processes of working with what will come are stuck in this, I need someone to tell me what's going on. I need someone to tell me that this has happened, this is going on. Similarly, when we talk about some of the different types of historical events that have taken place, where you have fed one piece of history to begin with, and then later on others begin to investigate what was the real story here, what actually happened. There are some incongruencies here, things are not adding up, right? What are they actually? And then digging into the archives, finding old movies and old scenes. For instance, I just saw one the other day of a very specific prominent person that was very high featured in the from 1935 to 1945, you know what I'm talking about. And the clear whatever was going on at some kind of Olympic stadium. I can't remember when it was 36. I can't remember when it was. It doesn't matter because this is not important. But what is important is, well, historical people would say that is very important. But so anyways, I saw it on Twitter and there was just one and then it's gone and I can't find it again. You know how it goes. And since it's not something I really want to connect to or write down or have in my private log anywhere, then I just look at it and I'll let it go. But it shows the understanding of reality is never what we think it is. We are being fed different narratives. And we have narratives within ourselves. We have narratives of self, others, and reality. So what we need to do is to scrutinize these narratives. Of course, as a psychotherapist, I'm also saying you need to scrutinize your trauma and the things that you need to work with. But when we talk about the fifth dimension, it's all about the mind. It's all about narratives, about technology. It's about how do we operate in reality with what we have now learned about self and others. Others are the fourth cycle that we were to do over due to the fall of Atlantis, and everybody was reseeded into these four organic lineages where they were doing a do-over. Come on, you didn't learn it, so get your together and now you learn it. Clearly not, because one of the issues is this kind of power and desire and personal needs, which means that they hadn't learned the 1-7 pillar lessons. And that is, you learn to administer your energy system for the highest good of the many, because it's transformative. We're here to work together, people, not against each other. And that's some of the things that went wrong as well with the timeline event and all of the things that goes back. And if you want to say, what's the root? What's the cause? Well, the cause and the condition go back to the three lineages. And then you say, okay, what happened? Why did these consciousness units, aka high order types of genetics that are imbued with energy and consciousness in one go, similar like our DNA has different methods and mechanisms built into it. And it is tied to our mental field, but it's not conscious in the manner that the original genetics are, because they're tied to our energy system and everything we are. So what we are will be mirrored into our genetic structure, in our organic vessels, in our energy system, as well as in our holographic structure that composes the energies and the code systems that are necessary to produce consciousness production and consciousness progression. So with that, we understand, okay, so if that kind of went wrong in the previous cycles, then we understand it was kind of coding that went wrong. And that's the root of some of the issues that led to the timeline event and how we were trying to solve it afterwards. Can we change the code of this? Can we, quote unquote, reprogram it? And no, not computers. Computers are a downsized version of this original technology. Always the other way around. Don't take the basic level, the low level, and blast it up to fit the higher order level. Other way around. It's top down, not bottom up. So whatever we have here are downsized versions of something that used to be in all of its different aspects. And the four lineages have definitely not lived up to their requirements. And we can see the controllers and administrators and elites and whatever they're called, the faction that had the insight and were from time to time in contact via the councils with what's going on here, the governance of it. They were that one lineage, and they were supposed to be administered the 410, and they are part of, as I said, the galactic planetary solar councils and these different organs. And since they have allowed to what's going on here, we could say, well, not in the original intent of what the 410 pillar was supposed to be, plus the 410 pillar ties up to the D10 collective, which are administered by a very specific group that many of you are also aware of to the different degrees, which is so interesting when we look at that type of group inside our reality. They're like these little critters that are all over the place, both in Denmark as well as in Australia. And you're kind of thinking, oh, that's a nice little salamander there. Why does it look like it does? Why is that so small and tiny? And when we know how they actually look, and that's because they don't really want to be here, but they need to have some kind of genetic marker that allows them to exist and come and go as they like into this reality field. So when we talk about, again, going back to narratives and what the narratives are, what is your narrative about reality? If your narrative is that you need some kind of authority to tell you what is and what isn't, I would say this is probably where you need to go over the 1-7 pillar again, get your foundation straight, clean up what needs to be cleaned up there, go into the 2-8, see your connection to others, which as a psychotherapist, I would say probably goes back to some kind of not completed types of psychodynamics that didn't go so well with your parents. Were there some kind of lying there? Were there some kind of deception? Were there some kind of secret? Was there something that you needed them to come clean with? Was their marriage built upon some kind of interface that appeared happy, showing everything to be good for the outside world? And then when you came back home, you knew what was going on, but since you didn't have the words for it, you just felt the dynamics of this deception and this distortion, and this nothing was what it appeared to be, and everybody was smiling, but really not when you were just coming home, and that unpleasantness. And that is now in some people, not saying all, but that could be an idea of why some people are, even no matter how much they get insight and they study it and they get all sorts of different people saying more or less the same thing, and they begin to connect the dots and trying to connect the dots, but there's this blockage. What's the last piece that's missing? And that's typically psychodynamically oriented towards childhood issues, that what some people are projecting and transferring into the quote unquote the disclosure project is really a disclosure of what was going on in their own childhood. So begin there and get that one sorted if you need. And I'm not recommending that. It's not always a good idea, all depending on your how your parents are today. Some parents you can talk to, others that would just be a re-traumatization. So the whole point is to sit. The best way to go around this is to sit in meditation and investigate your childhood memories, and then begin to look at what is it that you didn't see there, what is it that you didn't allow yourself to see, or what was it that you weren't allowed to see but you knew. And once you get that with your grown-up mind and your frontal lobe looking at the limbic system and your different types of structures and defense mechanisms and how you created a narrative that made you cope in that environment, then you begin to say, okay, that narrative needs to be upgraded. So I'm not imposing my childhood narrative about some secrecy where I just want the grown-ups to come clean. tell me how things are. Seriously, I know something, but whenever I ask for it, I just get this story that, no, everything's fine. Daddy and I are okay. Or whatever it is, something similar like that. And that is being that foundational coding then goes into the whatever's going on in workplaces and seeing secret societies everywhere. I'm not saying they're not there. But point being is these dynamics tailor a story that makes us perceive the world in a specific way, including when we begin to look into these ideas of some of the more secret levels of our society, which is there, but it works differently. We can't impose our childhood structure onto reality. That's part of one of the basic lessons in how to administer the energetic settings of a reality. And that is, we are energy, it's energy. And if we have a configuration that tailors our perception a specific way, then we will impose that via our quote unquote programming onto reality, and we will interpret it through the lenses of our own internal programming. So change our programming, and then reality, it will not change, but our perception of it will change. And that's all we have. That's all we have. We have perception of reality. If I choose to look out my garden and say, this is all there is, this is the world as it is, and tap into the paradigms that sciences have come up with that suits their narratives and their understanding of reality, and have superimposed it on the collective, saying this is how it is. And I know, due to my studies, where that began and where that shift happens and when that happened, due to the Age of Enlightenment and some of the brotherhoods that made sure that reality looked in a specific way, right? So we know that, but yet we still tap into it because it's so part of the collective ideas of what reality is. So when we're talking about the another version of reality, those of us who are in this process, we need to scrutinize what kind of narrative we actually want to project out there. So we make sure that it's not a narrative that's full of distortions, because that's part of the responsibility for those of us who are doing the awakening and activation processes. We need to step back and learn what we were supposed to know from Pillar 1-7. How do you operate inside this reality? What is the laws? What are the energetic dynamics? How are the transition dynamics? What kind of transformative processes can you and can you not do? And here I'm not mean as you cannot do this, but as in what is wholesome and fruitful for the energies of a reality field, not creating more distortion. And again, tapping back into full disclosure. So in this, when in any forms of human history has any civilization where there has been either leaders within the 410 elite group come clean, said things as they truly are, other than to one specific or two specific people that then come out and say, this is what I've got, thus I have heard, right? But at the end of the day, not necessarily the full truth, because communication in itself is full of gaps. Communication using the voice has limitations to it. So the true knowledge is to be gained through our higher order energy system and our higher order senses. What can be said and done through the ears and eyes and mouth and voices and language and the current type of brain capacity we have now will be by its mere nature limited, hence not full. And the full disclosure comes from the individuals that are bold and brave enough to look into it first as what we could call generic studies within reality, learning the sciences of what is and what isn't, and make sure that the background is as solid as possible. And then, of course, the emotional, psychological studies, as in, why is this important to me? Is it actually because I'm trying to solve a conundrum from my childhood? Or is it because I actually want to solve a conundrum that goes into self and others and reality because it has a purpose and function for the highest good of the many? Take away the selfish angle of the need for full disclosure. Why is it so important to you? For me, the only thing that's important is this dichotomy and this cognitive dissonance between what I know reality to be, and that could very well be a program too. I'm observant of that completely, and I try to change these programs. Say, okay, let's try another program, which I began with the whole everything is good and fine, the astral programming, where we go through the first steps of our awakening process, where everything really seems very nice, and people end up in bliss and samadhi and gratefulness, and many stays there, and that's a beautiful place to be. And that's a really good one that heals our heart, and that heals a lot of our childhood issues. It heals our emotional field, and it's a good place to be. And then for those of us who are more bold and brave, we say, okay, thank you. I am appreciative of the healing program that I went through here, that are now making me strong enough to see reality as it truly is. And that's why we really begin to activate and begin to awaken and say, okay, take away the veil from my eyes so I can see what is truly going on. So the search for the full disclosure is actually an inner search. It is your personal search. It is your search to find your truth and your remembering and your memories and what you were and what you are and what you can become and why you are here now. And that's the deep root of the full disclosure. Because if you think about it, will it in the long run? Imagine this scene. We have had whomever president. We technically already had on Letterman and whatever these talk shows where they kind of already said it, right? That's all they can do. Hence, which is kind of the trait of the different groups that are here that have administered our reality field in different ways or forms. They can't say it out directly, because then their career's over and what have you. But they can say it in all different ways and forms. So let's play with the scene. We are having whomever is in the chair. It doesn't really matter. We know that. Whomever is in the chair, for those of you in America, or whoever is here in the Danish government, comes out, my prime minister do a special broadcast where she's literally, we had one that joked around that, which was not funny, but we kind of had it played out as a quote unquote joke. Was it a joke or was it actually legit information? We can always ponder upon that, can't we? But the whole point is coming out there in front of TV and everything. And then we have other things going on where everything is now, we don't really know if it's real. Is it AI generated? Has it been modified? Has it been tampered with? Is it the real photo? And I'm referring to a very specific case here. Why is she wearing a 7-year-old sweater, right? If she's coming out telling she's okay, and oh yeah, then we can spin off. Why the need to spin off? Sometimes it's good just to wait and see what will unfold instead of trying to find explanations based upon vague quote unquote evidence, based upon vague quote unquote sources. Wait for it to unfold. See what the pattern is. What is actually that's being said there? Not necessarily the figure you see, not necessarily the whole issue with the sweater, not necessarily the whole issue whether or not she's healthy and well or not, but what is it that's being shown there? What is the new dynamic? Step one, it's unusual that we have a specific group within the royalties that suffers from different types of diseases that's normally not being put out there, which normally not being shared. That's another type of demystifying and dethroning the different authority figures into being just normal people that are peeing and pooping like the rest of us. And of course, can get illness and different forms of diseases because it's part of the human constitution. So what we're seeing here is that the normal groups that had quote unquote power, whether it's within political system, the nobility, the elite, or whatever it is, they are all being dethroned. And that's the question we should ask ourselves. Why is that dynamic happening? And what does that lead to for us as individuals, for those who have a need for authority, for leaders, for nobilities, for elites, for people that will take care of reality for them? They are now seeing that the ones that they normally put their faith in are now falling apart. The Pope couldn't conduct his speech. I forgot what it's called in English. We just had it this weekend, Palm Sunday. I can't remember what's called in English. Bear with me. Those of you who read the news, you will see he wasn't able to go out and hold his annual speech. He had to, because he's old, he's fragile. What's the point of a church having a leader that no longer can hold the sermons, that no longer can hold the speeches? What does that say about that religion? And onward and so forth. Things are falling apart because what used to fuel it are no longer there, and the figurines are going into decay and entropy, and the systems that were fueled by different forms of brotherhoods are no longer there because these groups are no longer there fueling the brotherhoods, and onward and so forth. The net is collapsing. That's a form of disclosure as well, isn't it? So where does that lead and take us as individuals? And that's where the personal maturing, growing up, it should not just be called activation as in activating your memories, and awakening as in learning how to administer yourself in this reality, being in a way where you know what actually is going on within your personal field, because that is what you have to administer to begin with, not as much what's going out there. Because if you get the two basic understandings, that one, you perceive reality due to the narratives you produce, due to the narratives you have, due to the comfort zone you have, due to the distortions you have, due to the psychodynamics that are running you in a specific way so you feel comfortable and functional in the world. You have narratives that determine how you perceive reality. So if you don't like what you see, change the narratives and then figure out what that is. And that is sometimes easier said than done. In theory, that's what you need to do. The practicality of it, the pain, the hurt, the trauma, the childhood issues, the crying, the feeling of the breaking down of your heart and the reconfiguration of the broken heart and healing the whatever you have is a whole other matter. That's the long, difficult journey. Thinking about things, how to do it in theory, that's the strategy. That's one thing, that's where you begin. You know it in your head, but it has not been felt, it has not been experienced, it has not been integrated, it has not become part of who you are. It has not modified, quote unquote, your energy system yet. Just because you study something doesn't mean it changes your emotional perception and or your different ways that your body works and the electrochemical processes that goes with the cognitive emotional bridge that is adapting the way that you are perceiving reality. What are the purpose of these narratives? Well, they are kind of coding your neural network to produce specific type of enzymes that are linked to specific type of thought forms, that are linked to specific type of programs, that controls the way you feel, that controls your electrochemical neurotransmitters and fires off different sections of your brain, that allows you to think specific type of things, that then goes and ripple into your body, activates different types of enzymes that then make you quote unquote feel certain things. And in that perpetuating cycle of different activation of different types of energies that again makes you respond in a specific way. The little puppet, marionette doll, right? So we are having the Pinocchio here. So we could call it, we have had the Wizard of Oz. So we are the Pinocchios, aren't we? Learning how to not make our noses grow. And what happens to Pinocchio? He grows up, doesn't he? He gets free of the strings, even though he loves his father. He gets free of his strings, and he tumbles out into the world like the fool. And in that process, he learns to become not just a wooden doll, because someone made him into that, a replication of something, a desire, a need for someone to impose certain ideas upon, to fill out certain gaps, and to make sure something happens. And Pinocchio stumbles out into the world, and eventually, through all the things he experiences, he comes to a realization. Who am I? What am I? What am I doing here? I was made out of wood. Perhaps my life is something more. And then begin to strive. I want to be a real boy. I want to be a real human. And then he begins that journey. We could, of course, also say it's a kind of a story, the sad story of the grace, if you like, but they don't grow noses. As far as I know, they don't have any because they don't need to breathe. So with that said, Point being here, using different techniques where I circle around different things, it all comes down to us. There's not one secret teaching system that has not told, get hold of your own house, know thyself, right? So that's where we begin. Whatever we are will be tailoring, conducting, producing the way we perceive reality. Can we change reality physically? As far as I know, that was taken away from us due to the timeline reconstruction after the fall of Atlantis. So that property has been taken away from us. But we can dream of it. We know we used to be able to do so. And eventually we might be able to do so again. Until then, we are using machines. So how can we use our machines the best way possible? They're made of energy. We are made of energy. So as we are learning to administer our own energy system, we can also learn to administer the energies around us as part of our influential sphere. And that's our expanded energy system. And then we'll learn to expand our mind into our expanded energy system when we have cleared it enough so we can actually see what's going on, perceive, sense, feel, smell, whatever of the high order senses that we are capable of activating due to our original composition. Some has better sight, some has better hearing. It is all different. It's not all the same. And then we'll learn to understand, okay, how can I become a transformer of the reality field energies? How can I be around others in a manner that's conducive for all? Repeating the steps of the 1-7 pillar, 2-8 pillar, 3-9 pillar, so that we can become part of in our local environment, as part of our local energy system, as part of our local perception of reality, as part of our local nodal point in the holographic configuration that we are part of, that we unfold, that we transform to change the world. What I'm saying here is that you can have as many authorities that comes out, going back to the little play out here with my prime minister coming cleaning, saying, well, we know there are extraterrestrial life out there. We have now finally got the evidence on the table. We are fully aware of that this has been kept inside society. Would they come out and say that? Probably not. They were probably tailored as a one new incident, and by that put the lid on what has happened prior to that, because nobody really wants to show what's left of that. And most of these facilities have been abandoned anyways. Again, due to the groups that are behind it has left the premises. Elvis has left the building. And what is left is now his tunes and his songs and the echo of something that was that no longer is. What does that take us? Can we then cry, mourn the loss of whether it is Elvis or Michael Jackson or Peter Pan, for that matter? What are we clinging on to? A fairy tale land that we can fly into due to specific type of quote unquote dust that allows us to fly? You know what I'm talking about. Are we going to raise our awareness using artificial means? Of course not, because all you get is to some kind of weird fairyland where you have Captain Hook and you have weird things going on that you're really not in control of, because Peter Pan is just a kid, right? He never grows up. He's the eternal kid that never grows up, that goes away to fairyland using fairy dust because he doesn't want to grow up. He doesn't want to have responsibility. He doesn't want to go out in the world and be the man they actually could be. He wants to remain in the childhood state. And if need so, using dust to be there and to stay there, and then have all of these weird fantasies that are all going on in his head that are never really participating in life and doing any fruitful with it. We could call that the story of the modern form of gamers. So you see, this is a form of disclosure too, for those of you who know the different stories and combine it with different groups inside our society. You will see the trends in the programs and you'll understand. That's another way of existing. The last one I want to address here is the trap that most of us go into, is this whole understanding. If only I do so, then the world will change. Well, your perception of the world will change for sure. And you will learn to administer your narratives in productive ways. Some of them are painful and you need to go through them in all ways and forms. You can't escape. You can't use fairy dust to get away from it. Some of them, if you do use fairy dust and different forms of artificial means to get into the quote unquote higher order states of mind, which is not, you just tap into the astral plane, will just be a representation of what's in your emotional field anyways. You'll just see your own nightmare figures. You will see what you hold in your field, because whenever we enter into into the deeper states of awareness, our awakening is not just about the outer realities and inner outer axis. It is what's going on out there, but we know that's a projection of what's going on inside ourselves. So the first step is know thyself. Clean out your own house. Clean up your own mess and begin to look at whatever you have got in your fields. And that will be what you will experience in the first very long processes. Hence, within the brotherhoods, the different steps, the different ladders that you'll have to climb to get to the different understanding of, okay, this is a ring in my energy field and that holds that and that distortion. Or this is another ring in my energy field. It holds that and that distortion, and onward and so forth. And in that way, you're not only doing the psychodynamics, hence which is why you need to know what your childhood traumas and what your childhood psychodynamics are, because they are the foundation of what clogs your higher order perception. So we need to clean up our 3 lower fields first, and then begin to work our way back in history. And that is chiseled into our energy system as memories, as programs, as interception, as all sorts of distortion. That is not an easy task. It's like taking an old computer that has a program that's really not working well, and it has been imbued with a lot of algorithms that are not working to make the computer work better. Actually, probably put in there to make it collapse and not work at all. So that's the journey we're on. That's, for me, that's the disclosure that's needed. The awakening process, that's what's needed for each and one of us. And then say, well, I will search for my full disclosure of who and what I am. I will remember who and what I used to be. I will play with the idea that there used to be higher order types of civilization. I will play with the idea as a foundation of my reality perception that there are alien technology present in our reality field. It's just in another dimension. That's why I can't see it. I will play with the ideas that the world is much bigger and larger than it actually is. And at the same time, I will scrutinize these ideas so I don't go into a full-blown distortion level where I see things that's not there, where I imbue things onto this reality because it's the projection of my energy system. And make sure that your perception and your interaction energetically is as transformative and higher leveled as possible, whatever that means, in its ups and downs and merry-go-rounds. And there you get, and there you lose, and there you have, and then you have not. And at the end of the day, it's not about what you want. It's about what does this world need. It's not about other humans. They are responsible for their own journey. And that is just as painful as yours, if not more, all depending on where you are. Waking up is, unfortunately, due to the entropy, going to be through crisis as we are right now. Humanity has had around 2,500 years to do it less distorted, less chaotic. But as always, as we see with all high cultures, they get into the rut of having power and are not eager to let that go until everything around them begins to disintegrate because of the wrongful use of energy and the wrongful use of power. And that's a story that will come on to us as well, as we might or might not climb to the heights of what we potentially could be or what we potentially used to be. So that's our own scrutinization. And that's where I feel those of us who are doing this journey today with our knowledge and our understanding, and where we are in the what we call the era of the human history. It's up to us to do a better choice. It's up to us to do the transition. It's up to us to choose differently than so many other people have done. The majority, and not align with what everybody else does, but align with what is the true purpose and function of our energy system. What are we supposed to be? What are we supposed to do? Whatever end of the spectrum it appears to unfold. And when we discover that parts of this spectrum is not to our liking, then it's up to us to change it, to transform it, to upgrade it, and to elevate it. And by that, by our action, by our energetic awareness, and by our choices, show the world itself we're still here. We've been lost. We have been forgotten. We have let ourselves be forgotten. We have forgotten who we were for whatever reasons and purposes. Some chose to be in oblivion. Others were put into oblivion. Either way, those who chose to go in there, some of them did it through a contract, thinking it would only last so and so long, just to discover, like everything else, words doesn't stand much in this reality. Vows are not really being upheld, and deception and misconduct is unfortunately more common than we would like. So our innocence, our innocent heart must not be damaged by the fact that the grown-up mind knows this is the world, this is how the world works. But even though it is so, we can choose how we are to conduct our innocent heart so that we fuel our body with the kindness and caring that it needs. And at the same time, we develop a higher order energy system that is in this weird dichotomy of double awareness, of the innocence and the kindness towards our own physical form, and at the same time, the kindness towards who and what we used to be as humans inside this reality. And yet again, with the inner higher order types of information and the inner teacher pushing us to awaken more, activate more, and find the balance between the high and the lower in our own energy system. If the majority of humans, there is a critical amount, if 30% of the human population would reach the potentiality and the true purpose and function of their original awareness, the Truman Show would cease to exist. It is only there because people choose it to be there. It is only there because they're programmed to uphold it via their thought forms, their emotional feelings and responses, and the way that they choose to go through life as they see fit for their narratives and for what they have the capacity and purpose and function of. Does this make us better that are awakening and activating? I would say no, because in many ways our journey is 10 times worse and so much harder than anyone else. So the whole projecting out and saying we must save humanity, I will say withdraw that projection. Save yourself first and foremost. As we know, when you're on the airplane, put on the air mask on yourself first before you try to help others. Because if you can't breathe, then it won't be 2 seconds and you will be out. And then the greater loss. But if you put on the breathing mask and you can breathe, then you are in the capacity of helping so many more, putting on their air mask so they can breathe, putting on the oxygen mask so they can breathe. This is what we are doing. Take care of yourself first. Know what it means to be fully activated and integrated, and use that knowledge to create a different type of field that emits different type of energy, that vibrates in a different manner. And then begin to figure out what can you do with that? What is your purpose and function? How can you contribute to change this world? You don't need a parent to tell you what to do. That's part of growing up. You learn to do it by your own demises and your own devices. Both intended to put there. Because some of the things we learn from, we will learn to let go of because it's no longer of use. And that's a loss, and that demands grieving. So the process of activation is just as much a process of mourning the loss and grief, and learn how to be in that very unpleasant state of pain and sadness. And yet rise up, back up again on our 2 feet and say, I know that this is necessary because it's a way of letting go of things that are no longer of use. And I can look at this in different ways. Of course I am to grieve and mourn the loss. That's healthy. But once that's done, we also learn how to move on. And some of these patterns are more sticky than others, and some are more complex than others, and some take longer times than others, all depending on the degree of trauma. With that said, we are in the process of full disclosure already. It's everywhere. It's just not what you expect it to be. So people who say it's never going to happen, I'm saying it's already happening. But it depends on if you choose to say it's not happening because you want one specific outcome to unfold. If you want the parent, the quote unquote, who's in the chair, leader, to come out and say they are here, then in a way, you're just playing out your childhood trauma. So what I'm saying is, you act as if it's already happening because it is. You live by the response that it is already happening because it is. You unfold your potentials in the framework that it's already happening because it is. And you choose the timelines where this becomes the new norm, where the people around you are fully aware it's happening because it is. It's just a very slow process. But you determine how you're going to unfold the energies of this process. How you're going to use the subcurrents of our society. Are you going to find the true yellow brick road out of this Wizard of Oz, Truman Show narrative that we are in, and then pave the way beyond the programs that's been tailored for you, and then begin to create what type of future timeline you want to be part of by and via the way that you are administering your narratives, your comfort zone, your emotional field, your biological field, as well as the purpose and functions that you take onto yourself, the sciences you work with, the sciences you create. Again, rested and nested upon a solid foundation of mythology and strategies that are not distorted, that are not out of whack, and that are not built upon loose ends of evidence, but to the degree it's possible is based upon what we could say evidence doesn't have to be tangible, but it can be the common, the common denominator, I forgot, the common thread that is in all what you're seeing. If you listen to people that talk about their otherworldly experiences, question 1, is it a program? Question 2, is it the real deal? We need to learn to ask these questions as we move further into the technocratic unfolding of the 5th dimension with everything that's AI generated, which is a good tool if we use it correctly. But it needs to be transformed, of course. Right now it's machines. Secondly, we need to learn to discern what's real and what's not. And in a way, that's full disclosure as well. We are now seeing how machines can generate what we perceive to be movies and realities and living beings and what have you. And at the end of the day, it's just mimicking some kind of program. So if a machine can learn the programs, we should ask ourselves, what does that make us? That's another level of disclosure. So we're having on so many levels that are pushing us to realize that things are not what they appear to be. So what are they? And how do you get to that knowledge without putting your faith in authorities, because they are clearly no better at this than the rest of us? So the old ideas and paradigms of looking to the leaders for answers is look back at yourself. Where can you find the answers? Not by studying the internet, because we really don't know what's real and what's not anymore, right? But what's in you? What do you have? And you don't know if that's real or not either. But that's the maturing process where you learn the discernment, you learn to transform, and you learn to look behind what is there, the Wizard of Oz. You learn to follow the trails. You learn to follow the crumbs. You learn to follow the leads that you get. And from that, you create the pattern that will lead to your full awakening, that will lead to your personal disclosure of who and what you are and why you perceive the reality the way you do and what impact you can have on reality. And that's where I will end this little podcast, and at the same time also tie a bow on the whole discussion of full disclosure. Because for me, full disclosure is that you realize who and what you are, you realize what you're capable of doing through the different processes of grief and loss and moaning and mourning, and at the same time transform this into your personal standpoint and knowledge and experience of what reality really is. And then from all of this, grow an authentic self where you know this is how the world actually is, within my field and what I am made of, and then take responsibility for that. And as my father always used to say, mind your own business, right? Don't put your nose into other people and tell them what to do. So I will here say, I can, at this point, that's why I keep putting it back to myself. I keep putting it back to, what is it? How do I perceive the world? What I perceive others do, that's a projection. So we walk the talk first ourselves. And I can say here that I am doing my own full disclosure in the different types of work I'm doing on randigreen.one, as well as on the whole Academy website. I'm doing what I can to disclose what I know in the manner that I see fit for the highest good of the many. And that is always up to debate, because what is the highest good of the many? And for me, it's simple. What leads to a transformational process that will empower people so that they can ask the right questions to get the right answers, so they can remember who and what they are, and from that get the tools to go through the process of awakening that to some degree can be painful. So that's a different angle than most of the ones that comes out and tell all the sweet talk and supports the, what we could say, the positive awakening process where everything is supposed to be positive. But there are some of us that are not made that way, that are not engineered that way, that has a different approach to reality. And that's kind of where I'm working, because I love the positive angle on it and I will love to stay there all the time. But it's just one end of the coin. So those of us who are going on the other end, the flipping the coin the other side, we are also to learn to acknowledge the other side, like the ones that are only doing the positive are also to learn what the other side of the coin is. Because as I said, in this reality, things go through transformation. Transformation by its nature needs some kind of opposition, some kind of thing that needs to be transformed or upgraded, some kind of polarity, or whatever the level is that we are dealing with these different reality dynamics. As you can hear, I'm tired now. So with that said, thank you for listening in. And until next time, take care.